Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kathleen and today I'm going to share with you how I trained for and ran a 50-mile ultramarathon. Let's get started with some sourdough. I'm going to have rising for our dinner, and I'm also, while I'm doing this, going to talk about nutrition because I think that is one pillar of training that people kind of forget. I have heard a lot of women talk negatively about the weight gain that sometimes comes with ultras, and not everyone will experience that, first of all, but for those that have, I just want to say, if you gain 5 pounds, 8 pounds, whatever, and then accomplish such a big goal, like lifetime goal, what's the big deal, right? We're so busy defining ourselves by the scale that we forget that growth is meant to push us outside of our comfort zone, and that growth is what's going to get us where we want to go. So it doesn't mean that weight gain will last forever. I mean, didn't we have weight gain when we gave birth to our children? Sometimes a new job can lead to stress and weight gain. But for some reason, I think when you're thinking of fitness, a lot of women associate that with weight loss. I think one thing that ultras did for me was heal my relationship with working out and allowed it to be for my mental health and my physical health instead of what size of jean am I, what number does the scale say, because the scale does not tell the full story at all. So with my ultras, kind of the mindset I had with it was prevent injury. And when you are preventing injury, one of the best ways to do it is to make sure you are at least in maintenance calories, if not slightly in surplus. And that means eating enough while you are running, as well as on your rest days. So while I was running, I would eat some form of nutrition every 45 minutes and tried to gauge based on my exertion if it was enough. I also took Element on all my runs. I'm not sponsored. I don't even make money on YouTube. That's the one I use, and I had amazing luck with it. I tried like salt stick chews, did not like them. And honestly, you have to take so many of them that I just found I got really tired of the flavor long before I'd actually met my electrolyte requirements. And then with carbs, for me, I found it was easier to go by like 100-calorie increments instead of how many grams of carbs is this. It just felt more confusing for me. Other people prefer ignoring everything else because the grams of fat and the grams of protein doesn't necessarily fuel you the same way grams of carbs do. So that's their mindset in doing grams of carbs. I just pick easy processed carbs. Candy is an amazing one. It's dirt cheap, way cheaper per calorie or per gram of carb than goos. Plus, goos don't always settle on my stomach. Another go-to of mine is always like PB&Js, bananas. These are things I'll keep at the aid station or in my packs or back at my car if I'm on a long training run. And then when my stomach gets queasy, and this will happen in ultras, it reminds me kind of pregnancy nausea. And this is why I think women are the secret weapon when it comes to endurance sports. You want me to work a 12-hour shift at the hospital and ignore my period cramps? Done. Ignoring pain, I'm good at it. And then in an ultra, you're ignoring pain. You're ignoring aches, just the same. In pregnancy, you're dealing with nausea and trying to ignore it, while still getting stuff done, raising your other children, going to work. You want me to run an ultra while I'm nauseous? Done. Puke and then continue running? I can do that. But truly, running's not that hard. I think I found that some of the difficult situations in my life, surviving the loss of a loved one, difficult, home life, whatever it may be, those difficult situations lead to that gift of endurance, and endurance begets character. That is its son, So I don't think that endurance is a bad thing. Enduring through trials is a bad thing. But what's cool about ultras is you get to take that mental endurance and apply it to something physical. So that mental fortitude becomes like your secret weapon. All right, I got interrupted by a phone call, but basically that was my mindset going into nutrition, was maintenance or slightly above, eating really well while I was running, making sure I was fueling myself, getting enough electrolytes in, and then when I was home, trying to encourage recovery by getting enough protein and carbs. So I trained for this on 3 runs a week. I incorporated a lot of walks, and then strength training, I would say I did 3 at the beginning. And then as the mileage really picked up, I cut down to 2. And that felt really doable for me. My walks were usually pushing my kids in the stroller, so I felt like they were still a form of training. And it was still teaching my body to stay on its feet. My 2 runs, Tuesdays and Thursdays, were an hour long. Sometimes I would push the kids on the treadmill, but often this year they were just getting a little bit too big. And so I would find that I couldn't quite manage that. So I would get up and go early before they woke up. It was usually like a 4-mile run. Yeah, it was usually a 4-mile run. I did have some hip pain right as I was peaking on some of my long runs that I'll get into, and I also hurt my foot at one point. So as with all things, there is no perfect training cycle. In May, I was running more around the 5K mark, 3-4 miles, maybe a 6 mile, and that was about as long as I was going. In June, I picked that up to a 10-mile run. And then after the 10-mile run, I ran my first half marathon of the year. That was June 24th. I actually launched a book that I had written that day, so that was the day of the book launch. I just had a lot of nerves, so I went out for a half marathon run, 13.1 miles, and then came home and got ready for my book launch. Maybe not the most time efficient, but it certainly helped clear my head. And then in July, I went up to a 15-mile, and then 2 kind of more maintenance runs just to maintain that moderate mid-level distance of 10 and 14 miles, and then increased to an 8. That was my longest run. So that was July. And then August, I had planned to run a marathon. I did a 22-mile run and then a little bit of a taper week before a marathon of obviously 26.2 miles the 19th of August. This was all in 2003. Isn't that crazy? And then after that, I had hurt my foot. The hip pain was kind of during the taper for the marathon, so the taper actually helped. So during the taper, I kind of let that hip pain kind of subside. And then after that, I think I was tired from the marathon, and I was out for just a half marathon, and I remember running along, and all of a sudden, my ankle popped. It wasn't my ankle, it was kind of my foot. I ended up having subluxed my cuboid bone, and it took forever to heal. So sadly, after that, I really struggled. But through walking and incorporating runs when I could, I did still hit my longest week of mileage, which was 59.12 miles for the week. That was like my peak week of mileage. My peak run was the marathon, but in September, my biggest week was 59.12 miles. The ultra was the end of September, so my mileage kind of went down. I had a 17-mile run, a 20-mile run, a 10-mile run, just kind of fluctuating my way down. And the ultra itself was 50 miles. So at this point, my kids were still pretty young, and they definitely needed mom at bedtime. They would not have done well if it was just my husband. So because I wanted to be done by my kids' bedtime, couldn't start at 8 a.m. because I felt like that was too tight of a cutoff. So I started earlier. That way I would for sure be done in time. So I went up to Palmer Lake, Colorado at like 3 or 4 in the morning with one of my good friends. And she paced me on her bike in the dark around the racetrack for the first, I want to say 13 miles before the race even started. And then the race started. So we were like desperately looking for the sunrise, and don't get me wrong, it was gorgeous, but it was super short. And so I was like, man, we looked forward to the sunrise for hours, and then it was like come and gone. But it was still really pretty for the few minutes that it lasted. The train track goes right by the lake, and so that's really cool. How you doing?
Doing good.
Woo!
Yeah, sun's up.
Sun's up.
Sky's awake, so
Yes.
I'm awake.
At 8, they're setting up for everything. You're picking up your packet, and so you get like this like second wind, and it feels like a fresh start, even though you're already 13 miles in.
Woo! Yeah, Kathleen!
There was another gentleman, and we started running at the very beginning of the race. So I was, 14, 15 miles in, and he was running a little too fast for me, but I was just hoping to kind of stick with him a little longer, get to visit with him. He has a daughter my age, and it was just kind of fun. And I was just like, you know what? My heart rate is too high. I cannot keep up with this. So I ended up walking a little bit to bring my heart rate down, and then connected with Terry. Shout out to Terry Ray. Got to know her daughter more. And she and I ran ages together, just ages. And I remember we hit the 30-mile mark, and I was overjoyed. The longest I had run by that point was 34 miles. I had ran a 50K the year before, turned out to be 55K. And so to hit the 30-mile mark was like, okay, I've run this before. It's longer than I've ran this year because the longest was the marathon. So it still felt really cool. But I was like really looking forward to mile like 35, which was the longest I'd ever run. And so I remember hitting that and being so shocked that I still felt good. Like I'd had bad moments in between. So because I'd been running with Terry at a bit more of a moderate pace, I still had a lot of energy left in the tank. And so at mile like 35, 36, I was like, okay, I'm going to kind of increase the pace a bit. And she was having really bad back pain that year. Do you remember this, Terry? So she took some Tylenol, took a break, and I just and it was a looped course, so I was still able to see her. I every now and then, catch up to her and go at her pace for a little bit and get to visit. And then at one point, her and her daughter had actually left, and I had missed them. But and then my husband and kids didn't show up until I was already more than a marathon into the run. And that actually was really good because I had that to look forward to. And then my friend, she went and had lunch with friends. I think she went to the Mexican restaurant, or maybe she just met up with a friend for coffee. I don't remember, but she was gone for little bits, took little breaks herself, was there with me for a ton of it. Super encouraging. That had worked very well. My husband brought me Chick-fil-A at one point, which was great.
Mile 45.
So I remember by this point, we did have a hotel that night, but I didn't want my husband to go to the hotel because obviously he was my ride, and I didn't want to ask my friend to have to take me up north when she ultimately needed to drive south. And so I was like, please hang on, like I'm almost done, like trying to push to the finish, but also like could really feel myself flagging, and the weather started getting cold, and so he knew like the kids were gonna kind of hit their expiration, but I was like just so close. So I just really had to drag my feet the last little bit, which of course makes sense. Like, no one's feeling good by mile 50. Everybody's hurting by mile 50, and you just have to ignore it. So I had to just kind of put my head down and force my way through it, and my friend Rebecca really helped with that. I tend to not run with music, but near the end, that is something I leaned on a little bit, but I just find myself getting bored with it. And constantly changing songs, or the song doesn't fit how I'm feeling, and that frustrates me more than it helps me. So I didn't use it a ton. Caffeine really helped, sugar really helped, making sure I was getting enough intake.
Thank you, buddy.
Finally finished. I remember as I crossed the finish line, I said like, "Oh, I'm ready to be done."
Go, mommy, go!
I'm ready to be done.
And they cheered for me a little bit at the finish, which was super, super fun. And then I was able to go to the hotel and kind of help my kids get settled. Of course, I was filthy, needed to shower off. And then my kids were wound up and had a hard time laying down and going to bed. But eventually we got everyone in bed. I took a very fast shower because they wanted me like in the room with them. And then I laid down, and I just remember as I laid there, my muscles were cramping, and I would like flip over and lay on my belly, and I'm not normally a belly sleeper, but I would just feel my whole posterior chain like tensing up as though I was doing like the Superman. Have you ever done those in workouts where it feels like your whole posterior chain is tight in order to lift your chest up off the ground. And I would like get up and try to roll out, take some ibuprofen. Was anytime I woke up at night, was trying to drink water. And then I remember at like 3 a.m, I woke up and I was ravenous and ate anything I could in the hotel room. And then bright and early, my kids had me up and we went down and ate breakfast at the hotel. And then we went to a church nearby, which was actually kind of fun. I was, of course, dead on my feet and super tense, like my legs. And so I probably looked like a robot, like waddling in and waddling out and not really able to walk. So I maybe wasn't all there, but it was still really nice to get to attend that church. And I couldn't believe I'd done it. You know, to hit 50 miles felt kind of impossible. But at the same time, I almost knew I could do it because 35 miles to 50 still felt like a huge jump. But when I was running the 50 miler, I was just like, I don't know how people run 100. Double this just seems impossible. Like if you told me at mile 50, you've got 50 more to go, I would have just told you I can't and have been done. But the next year I ended up running a 100 miler, which was last year, 2024. And so that's kind of crazy to look back on, is that I've now done 100 and this was the 50 miler. And so I've done double it. Like who? Like why? Why do we do this to ourselves? But there is something about that running bug that just gives you the drive. I think there's no such thing as a perfect training cycle. And it just goes to show even an imperfect training cycle can still lead to, in my opinion, a perfect race. Nothing really went wrong that day. I did feel like I could have gone a little bit faster in those latter miles, but that's fine. I think it was more mental, like those like mile 40 to mile 50. I think I could have pushed it a tiny bit in minutes per mile pace, but ultimately I'm nothing but proud of it. And it gave me the confidence that I needed to go for the 100. So let me know what distance you're going for in the comments and how I can cheer you along. Have a great day. Bye-bye.